This episode is sponsored by Victory Grips. Victory Grips are the standard in hand protection, plus, they just launched their new gym affiliate program. As affiliate owners, they understand the demands of gym owners. Their goal is to keep their gym referral program process as simple as possible. You'll receive educational content, early access to upcoming releases, and exclusive discounts for your members, plus, received a percentage of the net sales. Find out more at victorygrips.com. Welcome to the Power Monkey Podcast, where we chat with the best in the world about what they do. I'm your host, Dave Durante, with my co-host, Mike Service, and on today's episode, we have Mr. James Fitzgerald, the founder of OPEX Fitness. Now, James has been around the community for a number of years. He was actually the first individual male champion at the CrossFit Games back in 2007. He started OPEX, formerly known as OPT, in the late 90s and has grown it into the incredible company that it is today. We talk a little bit about that journey, him as an athlete transitioning into being a businessman, and where he sees the company going moving forward, moving maybe a little bit away from fitness and more into wellness and vitality. And let him speak a little bit about what those mean to him and how he envisions being able to make a bigger impact on the community worldwide in terms of health and wellness. It was very enlightening, a very interesting, a very different type of a podcast that we normally run. We know you're going to find this one to be interesting, so enjoy.
James, I get the honor of starting off some conversation with you. And first things that I really had a curiosity from is, at least from my background and the population that I'm generally in, which is the CrossFit community. I know you starting like circa 2007, 2010, but seeing a little bit more of your past where you got started. So let's say your origin stories within fitness and training, it seemed like it was more pre-2000. So like 98, 99 seems to be when you really started to have, let's say, a deeper passion for what you've evolved into now, which seems very focused on functionality, longevity, wellness, and kind of a full spectrum of training. So I'd love to hear more about that, let's say, period of time, pre-CrossFit and like beginning, just the beginnings of James Fitzgerald.
Yeah, I think when I was 18, I had an injury, and I kind of learned a lot about myself from that injury. A transition, I guess you could say, at a point of one's life where you realize that you're just a number. Well, that was how I perceived it, because I was an athlete and I was everything, and then I had, that was removed, and then all of a sudden you got to answer those questions at a young age of like, well, what really are you then if you're not an athlete anymore? So I was very fortunate to have that at a young age. So that would be a good, I guess, a pinnacle moment of the origin story, because then I got really interested in the things that I was observing in myself that got me back to a better structural and mental position. And that was from a physical therapist I was working with, and then me just indirectly seeing I had this real huge interest in, doing the physical stuff to get better, but then also, eyeing the fact that I am actually in better physical condition than I was when I was an athlete, and then I started teaching the old folks that were coming into the physical therapy session, et cetera, because I just had this fever now for like, wow, there's something inside of here. And there's the origin of the story where now I've got to learn about it. So I go to school, and then you get out and you become a trainer, and all of a sudden it's 1999 and I'm in Calgary, and I got, I'm broke, but I'm full of shit in my head, and I just want to start that thing. And so became a trainer and did the work. And at a time where I was geographically, it was a very affluent time in Western Canada. If you go back and review the cost of oil, and anyone from, I guess, Texas in America would understand those times. But everyone had cash, everyone was moving, everything was shaking. There was a lot of up and up, and so I just ran on the coattails of that for lots of people that were interested in it. And then there's not much more that's of interest to the story after that. It's just building the business and getting to 2007.
Mike, I'm
Yes,
going to let you jump back in, but I don't want to gloss
definitely.
over a point that just me as an athlete, I'm curious about, or a former athlete at this point. But you mentioned 18 having an injury. I believe you're a soccer player. Is that correct? That's where the injury occurred.
Yeah. I played two main sports of hockey and soccer.
Hmm.
I guess you would call it. It depends upon a lens, but in America, it'd be like a state level of two sports.
Hmm.
If that makes sense. And the injury was in soccer. Yeah.
Okay. And my questions are around this idea of defining yourself around the sport that you do. And I think the further you go within the sport, it becomes even more impactful, right? You get to the highest level, you do it into your 20s and your 30s, and it becomes basically who you are, how other people define you as well. And we notice that there's a huge drop off, like you mentioned, as to what do I do with myself and who am I if I am not an athlete? And you mentioned being able to navigate this at a pretty young age and be able to say, okay, I'm no longer an athlete at 18 because of this injury. I have to find a new path. How, what kind of tools did you use? What were you able to do to be able to say this transition needs to happen now? What am I going to do now that I can't use my physical tools to be able to figure out that next career path?
Yeah, I was just keying in on your question of what I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said what tools did I have that got me to, I don't think, as I reflect on it over and over, and it's been a while, so I appreciate the questioning on it. I think I had zero. I think I was actually at a -3, because based upon my thoughts in my head about existentialism at that period of time, which I had kind of drummed up by age of 13. I was one of those 13-year-old young boys who had this, like, you know, there's no proof though that there's things that happen after we die. Like I was having these thoughts in my head, right? So by the time I'm 18, I'm now in a really depressed situation, right? Because I got no things to hang on to. So I don't know, Dave, if I had tools per se. Now I could parallel that with things in my experience that probably gave me some hope. You know, I had what you would call a nuclear family. I had structure at home. I had, regardless of my belief, an Irish Catholic, background in my family and in my close proximity. I had a school that was K to 12. My graduating class was 24 people. I lived in a town of 3,000 people. You knew everyone. So I had these things, right? As like, you know what I'm saying? It's probably
Yeah.
just things that are around me that made me, like, and I had friends too. I had friends that, you know, I would, I would have stood in front of, I would stand in front of a truck for any of these people,
Mhm.
and they would have done the same for me at that time. And so I think it's those things, quote unquote, that gave me the tool, or that, like, were the tools actually that got me from one place to the next for that.
Yeah, James, it sounds like maybe you can affirm my thought there, but you had a perspective or a purpose of, like, maybe being more than just yourself. So like when you grow up in a situation like that, and I would relate a little bit. My graduating class was like 74 maybe, so giant compared to yours, but still on that level. And my home village in Ohio is like 2,000, 2,500 population. So you kind of relate with everybody around you, and you're a part of that, like a little bit tribal feeling. So where, I don't know, you see things happen to people, and there's always a congregation or a rally around those people. So maybe even with that more existential outlook on life, there's also that realist of like, well, okay, but things go on. Like, just because this part ended for me doesn't mean everything's ending. It just means I need to find my place in this bigger niche that I'm a part of.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the challenging thing, to reiterate how challenging that was, is that the way you eloquently talked about it there, I was the guy. I was the sports guy, the popular kid, the athlete, right? And I took that role on very seriously at a young age. It's hard for me to even discuss. I can only discuss it or write it or talk about it now because I'm more clear. I'm probably more vulnerable on my conversation than what I was then. But So you can imagine if that's pulled away, and my brain is not even fully formed, right? It's like this real challenging, challenging pull. So.
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
Mike,
Go ahead, Dave.
continue, because I think you had some more that you wanted to build up leading up to '07, where the rest of the community that we live in finally recognized James.
Yeah, I do, but it's I like I don't know, I like hearing this from you, James, because it paints a I don't know, a more vibrant picture of you, because you can come off very stoic, which I think you are, and I think that's a good thing. But yeah, it's nice, and maybe probably for all of us as we get older and further removed from our athletic careers, or maybe more aware of where our egos have been, we can be more vulnerable, and that makes for much more interesting conversation, I think, for people to listen to. So I liked what Dave was asking about with like, what tools did you have, and where you said, yeah, probably like -3 or 0. But I think some of that is also having the perspective and the wherewithal, or maybe the support, to have shown you, okay, you have no tools, but where can you get your tools now? So having been in that good situation to be with a solid physio that can show you maybe a direction forward, that had to have been impactful. And I'm curious, are you still in contact with that physio, or is that someone who was like a foundational person for you?
No, I'm not in contact. I actually was just trying to recall her name. But no, I was, I don't know if it takes a different rabbit hole, but she was extremely attractive too. So I,
can add some vigor to your rehab process.
Add spice to the story. It's like nothing went there, but I mean, it wasn't hard going back to those sessions. I'll say that.
Oh man, that sounds way better than the physio that got me through an injury, Konstantinos Galouzis. He was a very large Greek man, but also
kept me going. To heart now.
Dave could probably, and Dave, I just wanted to connect one more dot from you, maybe, and just us at Power Monkey. The physio thing just sticks with me, and I think that there seems to be a lot of physiotherapy and physiology and just awareness from what you do, James. And we were introduced to a lot of that as we diversified from being specialists, Dave being a gymnast his whole life, and myself being a weightlifter. And when we more or less were brought together with Power Monkey, we accumulated some really, really knowledgeable and trustworthy DPTs, specifically Dan Pope and Dave Tilley. And they, I think, were instrumental in both of us to showing us different ways and different paths and different awarenesses to not just be so sport and performance focused, but be much more holistic and like, okay, that's great, but are you going to still be able to do that when you're older? Do you want to do that when you're older? And at least having the tools presented to you to be able to meet bigger goals, I guess, or more holistic goals.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree, Mike, in terms of their impact on the way that we approach training, on the way that we approach trying to not just take what the previous generation did within our sports and trying to upgrade them and make them more scientific based, rather than just this is a millennia of training gymnastics and weightlifting a particular way, and we're going to do the same thing. So I appreciate Dan, Dave, and the rest of the PTs within our community, their take on how they can upgrade what we do. Now getting to that 07 CrossFit Games win, I know it's something you've probably talked about endlessly, but leading up to that point, talked a lot about programming for athletes and starting to train them. Were you doing that for yourself at that point? Were you programming yourself, or was anyone kind of behind the scenes being your coach?
Yeah, no, I had indirectly always programmed for myself. But I in the early, I guess it was middle 90s, because that's when the advent of quote unquote the crisscross between internet and information sharing for fitness. So I was, I did email programming from Charles Staley, Dave Tate, Charles Poliquin, regular interval conversations with Morta Pasquale, Dan Duchesne, internet forums, etc. So that was that was how you basically tried to figure out what you should do in quote unquote the fitness world, was from that like email program sent, a parasocial relationship, quote unquote, that so that went through like the late 90s. And then in 2000, I started training for Toughest Calgarian Alive, which was basically like an offshoot little thing in someone's year, that in order to do the events, which were, sprinting, swimming, rope climb, 5K run, obstacle course, pull-ups, bench press, you know, my mind, as you can see, even in the late 90s, was like really attuned to this, like, oh, this full onslaught of balanced fitness, and so I trained myself through that. And then one of my clients, who is a fighter, went to I think the story is Toronto, and I should probably clarify this with Jason, but he went to Toronto for a fight camp, and a number of guys were up from California, and they're like, what are you doing for training? What are you doing for conditioning? And they're like, oh, we're doing this CrossFit thing out of Santa Cruz. And that was 2003. And then he came back and he was like, Fitz, you got to check this out. And so I go on .com, and so the story goes. So I was doing all that, following it, perfectly, right, to the T. I was one of the purists back in the day that it was like, no, you don't do anything other than, Mm-hmm. It's still so hard, as I could see the smirks on your faces. You just see how much has changed in 20 years, right? Like the concept of free fitness, like, and doing it on your own, and no one gets to see it. There's something magical about that we've lost. I just wanted to take a point of consideration of that. Mm-hmm. But no, and I'm continuing on with the answer to your question of that. I did all that, so who was my coach? Yeah, I guess Greg Glassman, or whoever was like putting the things, but I just figured shit out every day, and I wanted to beat people all the time. And so then if you put that together, and then I was one of the first, besides Josh Bridges, because he was just crazy, because he used to just do all kinds of stuff. And there was other names like Kelly Moore and a few others, that we would do other things on top of the .com. And if you go back and look at it, you used to do pre stuff and post stuff, or post like after 800 comments, like a double of the day, like a second thing we did. So this was all my doing, right? I just came up with this as like a creative way to do something more, but I knew that something more was needed outside of like the required 5x5 press in the morning, right? Because I wasn't trying to go after the very admirable goals of the CrossFit phenomenon, right? Which is like, just get in, be intense, and then get out and like go play sports and eat fruits and vegetables and et cetera, be a staunch libertarian. I wanted to kill people. Right. I wanted to beat everyone that came on there. And every morning I would think to myself, what am I doing after this workout that's going to make me better? So the next time I come back here, I'm going further up the leaderboard. Mm-hmm. So anyways, that was all my thing. And I just included a little bit of the storyline of intentions inside of there too. But, and maybe we will get there, but a lot of my time is spent on the concept of physical freedom and autonomy today. Hours per day in terms of contemplation on it. And you can see why, I always would look around and say, like, it's not that difficult, but what is difficult is the motive and the competency for people to recognize, how to be a free mover.
Mm-hmm. I think, James, that was two big words, motive and competency. And those probably both fall deep in line with I would say your methods and maybe your passion, probably early on, starting off with, was it Mad Dogs? Was that the
Big Dogs?
Or Big Dogs? Yeah, Mad Dogs.
Yeah, Mad Dogs is actually better, but
yeah,
I never thought of that. It's 20 years too late.
Well, yeah, it's never too late. Just a new era.
Well, it is. It's dead.
But yeah, I think we run into that, I guess, when and we get brought on so much for people that are struggling in, let's say, one area, whether it's their gymnastics or their weightlifting, and they're looking for somebody that can help them with that. And me as someone who coaches quite a few people individually is I'm always curious with their motives. Like, is their motive just to hurry up and get, a number very, very quick, and they don't care what's going on? Or how competent are they to realize what the process is going to be in that? If they want to be able to do it repeatable and also accomplish all of their other goals. So, yeah, well, I guess my question from that statement is, how did you see your motives evolve from 99 to 07 to now? I think your competency, we could figure out how that evolved. That's just from hours upon hours of practical, working not only on yourself, but then applying that to a lot of other people very successfully.
Yeah, I think, that's a great question. I think it was the scaffolding of just, the coin term people use today is my lived experience. But like, I'm single, in 99, well, actually early 99. I met my wife in late 99. So that gives you a starting point, right? Like, I got a shit ton of piss and vinegar. I want to conquer the world. I'm starting at zero. And I want to continue to grow my mind, right? So that's my motives then. And then, as I get into it, I'm now, creating a business. I have a relationship, and I have a dog, and I have a home, and I have a job. Well, now there's other motives that are scaffolded on top of that, right? And now, I'm a director of one of the largest YMCA's in Canada, a strength conditioning director for the local area. I'm making more money than the CEO of the gym. And the YMCA's in Canada are like Life Fitness. Okay, they're not what you probably may see at YMCA USA. YMCA in Canada are like 12,000 member facilities, ice skating rink, 3 pools. Like, these are monstrosities. Okay, and I'm not just patting myself on the back. It's just that I had a successful idea around individual design that was never placed inside the market for that. So at that point in time, I was like, oh, this is fascinating, right? So anyways, my motives then, is to be a representative of starting that value, professional coach, right? I wanted to wrap my arms around every other coach that I was like working with and et cetera. I'm like, we're really fucking important people, so that's my motives there, right? My motives for CrossFit, my motives for building my business. Now I leave that, and I use all my credit cards to basically buy a big home and a huge basement and put a shit ton of equipment in the basement, and went from the YMCA to starting at zero again to go on my own. So full, I'm not a whore to the system anymore, right? So I'm intertwining like the business with it in my life, because that was my motives. My motives were, now I want to build a family, right? So we start having kids, right? And we move to the acreage, what people may see in the video, every second counts, of the acreage and my little gym outside that. Now my motives are 2 young girls, right? And a relationship with my wife. And now I have staff, and now I have an online training program. Now I'm building an education system. So you see the scaffolding of the motives change over time. And that was in the forefront, right? It was never what, some others may think, or others may have done, those were my reasons for doing CrossFit, and reasons for doing competition, reason for doing fitness. Was all like this exploratory thing to learn more about myself. I think that's what maybe brings, I'm just going to make a huge assumption here, probably brings all 4 of us together on this call, and a number of your listeners, is that we truly do think that you can learn a lot about yourself as a human through physical expression. And that was the thing the whole time. And then of course all the other stuff, right? Business, family, just like compounds and adds to it, right? Adds to the, I guess what you would call it, the fuel, to keep it going in that direction. So that was that was the motives. It was just like what was going on in with my life at the time, much easier to speak about now, as I look back, right? If I think I'm quoted actually, which is the nemesis, by the way, whenever you get into the limelight. I'm quoted, well, it's actually a good time because there's no such thing as social media at the time, but I'm quoted on the video of Every Second Counts being like, something like, the motives of just to win every workout or to beat, anyways, something along the lines, right? It's like, well, that's just what I thought at the time,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I thought. But if you were to like stretch that conversation out for a couple of hours, you probably would have had me crying about about my attention to detail with being a parent, so yeah.
Can I build on that part of it a little bit? Being a parent, I have two little girls myself, and I always love speaking with not only dads of kids but dads of girls too, because I think there are unique challenges that come along with having girls. But I think you've stepped away from social media a little bit and maybe allowed some of that devotion to be put more towards family and kids and things like that. But on the business side, we'll get back to the family side in a second.
Yeah.
You've built something, you seem hyper competitive the way a lot of us are, want to succeed not only as an athlete, but in the business realm as well. You've gotten the business to a point where it's successful in a lot of metrics. What has allowed you to be able to say, I've gotten to a point where I can step away from social media and not need to use my profile and me as a business person to be able to help build the brand moving forward? Is it able to do that on its own, where I can now step back and not have to be hyper competitive on a daily basis from a business side, and it still be able to move forward without me as the front man anymore? Do you feel like you've gotten to that point now?
Yeah, for sure. But I don't know if I'll be able to answer your question as to like how I would tell someone to do it, because
Everyone's different in that.
yeah, I
Sure,
guess,
sure.
it's just, yeah. I would say I'm definitely grateful and fortunate, and lucky. I'm 48. I started, remember I started business, quote unquote, like really getting heavy on business in the late 90s, right? So, my whole perspective of the digital landscape and, what I call fantasy media, is just different to me. So I can't actually help anyone with saying how I did, because not everyone's starting out at different levels. Everyone has different capabilities. Everyone,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's probably not worth our time on our show. But in private conversations, I love talking about the scorched earth concept of, how people live their lives in the digital world today. But that's not going to help either. But
I am curious about that. I am
I just
curious
needed to
about it.
mention that. I just need to mention it because it's yeah, it's just one of those things. We're all in it and all a part of it, but it's not human. It's completely artificial, right? And
How
it's
old are your
not
daughters?
real. My daughters are 16 and 13.
And I'm assuming that they have access to social media and phones and things like that at this point.
Yes.
And do you give any restrictions on them, or are they free to use as they please?
Yeah, well, I don't know if there's language on it, because whenever you start with the premise of restricting, then it's, again, we got to remember that me and Leanne, we didn't grow up with phones as a main communication tool, but my daughters did. So whether I like it or not, it's a communication tool. And you're just a part of the system. That's what I meant of the scorched earth prophecy, concept of it is like, you're just a part of the game. So, and a lot of people say, well, you have a choice. Yeah. Until you become a parent, and now the game's different. So, restrictive, I guess restrictive, just like with regards to how I teach my girls that relative to decisions we make and the behaviors we uphold in our family, it is important for them to know that they are a minority. They're like relative, whether they like it or not, they are the 3%. I'm very clear on and describing that to them as well, right? So when then I say, well, and this is what we feel would be adequate for your exposure relative to phones and etc. They already know now from the starting point, right? That it's like, wow, this is going to seem strict in your eyes,
Mhm.
you know? But why is it strict in their eyes? Do you see my point? It's only strict in their eyes because out of 100 friends, 97 of them don't have any restrictions.
Mhm.
You see that? Now that's reality, right? So you see the thing on it. Yeah, is it restrictive? No, it's not restrictive whatsoever. You know, so is it full on freedom? No, it's not. It's not that either. But we just try to find an adequate balance of what, you know, reality is, right? Because we're not 16 and 13, and we're not amongst those individuals and in how they communicate, etc. And we just do our best. That's what I keep telling Leanne, like, listen, we're just trying our best. We are also very grateful that they are 16 and 13, because although it may not seem a difference, we actually see a difference between our 16-year-old and our 13-year-old, even in 3 years, of the differences in the preying upon young girls and the preying upon young people to stay on the attention economy platform. It's even in 3 years. So I'm very, very empathetic under the language of restrictions versus freedom for you know, having daughters at 3 and 6 today. Like, oof, that's going to
Yeah. I appreciate, obviously, from my
be
perspective.
difficult.
What's that?
It's going to be difficult. It's going
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
very, very difficult.
And I think all of us here, Mike and Jordan and the rest of our Power Monkey community, we recognize, you know, from our own perspectives too, what social media can do to us. And so one of our routes to kind of maybe stemming that the disadvantages of it are to spend more time together. And Power Monkey Camp allows us to do that. And we all basically wait 6 months a year so that we can actually go to this location and actually turn the phones off as much as we possibly can and just spend time with each other for a full week and get to know each other more deeply, and it turns into homecoming for us, you know, like a family reunion of sorts. And that to us is like a reset. At least, you know, Mike, I'll let you speak on it, or Jordan, if you want to chime in, but it's a reset for us to be able to say, this is how life could be if we do this a little bit more often. Do you have routes in your own life to be able to get out and do that with your kids? What do you guys have as a go-to to be able to do it, not only within your nucleus, but also with the surrounding community, to be able to do it more often?
Well, it happens. Again, I'm not sure about. There's no intentional route for it. It just happens. So, I don't know. Like our girls are quite active. So you know, for example, this time of year, Chloe, my youngest, is playing school soccer, as well as she's part of a club soccer program here, and my oldest is now driving, you know, and which is like an unbelievable amount of freedom, not just for herself but her parents. And she loves rock climbing with me, and she loves working out with me, and she loves playing tennis. You know, so just by saying that, you could see that they don't have a lot of time to they don't have a lot of time to, like, you know, do, you know, I don't even know what the conversation we had the other night, streaks. There's this like streaks thing on does anyone know about this? Like how many times you snap, or how many anyways,
I do not.
it just goes,
Oh,
well,
wow.
here we go. This gives you, and hopefully you can pull me back in. But they have like these techno organizations, they set young children up with this like reward system for how many times, you know, to try to keep reminding you to post something, even if it's short, every day.
Okay.
Interesting, right? So see how see how, and even my daughters are talking about who has the biggest streaks and who's on 1,000 streak. Like, think about this, right? And it all just gets like floated in the conversation like it's accepted, right? And meanwhile, it's, you know, back screen, people are being like, how do we keep these young people on this thing all the time? You know, anyways. So we just, they don't have access to those things Monday to Friday, and Saturday and Sunday we have, you know, timelines of access to it. back to your conversation on the amount of screen time, et cetera, for social media. But so you can see that I'm not really sure how to teach about the intentions of it. It's just that we're active and we just do those things. And so there's no time for it. There's no time for that. Or
I think you're giving a really good answer to that though, James, because I mean, that's what I think that's what we're all so passionate about is, again, like movement, activity, like being present and like with people, like doing physical things. And that's why some of these, whatever streaks or things like that can seem like a foreign concept, because I think for the most part, we're all, let's say, doers, or we're fortunate enough to have grown up in sport and like to be in, groups and competitive environments that are physical. So yeah, I'm
maybe
curious.
That's the answer to the question. Then is the answer would be just keep moving. Just keep, it's very hard to watch, like to doom scroll when you're hiking in Arizona.
Yeah,
and that's difficult to do that.
That's what I like when you were talking even just about your perspective of like, yeah, you could wish that there's not all of this social media or cell phones and screen time, but it's a part of the reality that we live in. So better to find ways to navigate through with a best perspective. Like, why not be optimistic and more solution oriented than what you said, doom scroll? And the best way is to keep moving and go forward and offer opportunities and motivations for other people to do the same. So yeah, at our camp, I leave there being more optimistic that humans are good. Like I leave and I think humans are really, really good because we get every type of human that comes to camp. The ones that you don't want to get away from, the ones that are super annoying and you do want to get away from, but then you realize, you know what, though, that's even special in its own way. So like you learn a little bit of empathy for that. So I like this idea of, we have to move forward. Like the past is the past, whether it's in the fitness industry, whether it's in business, in our lives. So yeah, what are we doing to move forward? And it's for me, it's some affirming thoughts to hear from you, and a little bit making me think of some new things as well.
Yeah, if I can add to it, as I wrote down as you were talking about it, it's almost not a conversation around, because some may hear that and say, oh, just got to keep busy to keep myself out of trouble, because that's the usual thing, right? And it's not that, right? So it's more around the individual. Like, I'll just give you my personal example of it, and then people could just extract what they want from it. But for example, my girls still get, an unregulated phone, right? They still have access to it, but we have to have conversations, right? And so then now it ties back into, well, what is communication? What is relationships? And what is love? And what is security, right? And what is being present? Like, these things then have to be discussed inside of that, which bubbles up what I mean by when I say the word awareness. I don't want my daughter Chloe to be active, to be away from her phone. Do you see that? So what I want to have is to have representatives like Chloe to choose to do it, but be fully aware as to why they're doing it. And that you see takes a lot of work, right? That takes a lot of but you see that will not take shape if you don't have true love and true relationships with those individuals on the deepest visceral level. It will not, regardless. You can send them books, you could teach 6-year courses on it. It will not fix it, right? It's being present. What are you feeling right now, right? Why are you anxious to get back? Oh, I can't wait to get to my phone. Well, that's interesting. I'm glad, can we talk about your feelings around that, right? Why do you think that you feel this way? What is the expectation on the other? You see, that conversation needs to be had, that I skip over all the time, right? That I'm like, oh, they just don't feel that way about it. Why don't they feel that way about it? They don't because they're aware, right? Or they're starting to build the idea of awareness, right? of why they choose to do it, right? So now they're making comments like my young girls did. It's not a sideline conversation into nutrition, but I always teach parents about, that shit that they're going to have to go through with their kids making rough choices for food, right? That you don't have any control over, right? Goldfish crackers, the fucking preschool drive myself insane. But again, if we build on this notion that like the whatever is in their language understanding, I need you to be aware, right, that we all have choices, and I need you to be aware of how you feel surrounding that mentally, physically, etc. And then it just washes all the bullshit and the fucking politics and shit that comes around it if they are aware, right? Because now they get to make this decision on food and this decision on media as they become older as a free person, right? It's like I'm not restricted on it, right? I choose to do this because I full well know this is how I'm going to feel, when I do it or why I do it. And do you see that as being like a better starting point for people, just so we don't sound like, absolutists on moving. We don't move because we want to keep people off the screens. That's despicable.
Mm-hmm.
That's despicable. That's disgusting, actually. That's authoritarian. No, we want people to move because they can, and because it's for them, and then you can have access to all the other stuff as you want. But yeah, just be more aware. I just had to touch on that point relative to the accessibility to it. And
I think a lot of it has to do with community too, finding people that have like-minded things that they want to do. And I think that's one of the things that we gravitate towards, or what CrossFitters gravitate towards, or anyone that feels valued within a particular community. I want to go around these people because we think similarly, or we enjoy the same tasks, or we both enjoy, you and your daughter, going rock climbing or whatever it might be. We have a community around like-minded thinking. And I think that's what a lot of us are always striving for. Can I find a community where I feel embraced, where I feel welcomed, and we have similar things that we can agree upon that, make us better people?
And Dave, that what James was just saying reminded me of what you'll say oftentimes to all of us that are coaches, or even the participants at our camp, is to remember that we get to be here, like we're able to be here, like this awareness that we're fortunate, and once you realize that you're fortunate or lucky, you can be very grateful for that. So that's a good reminder that I've heard from Dave often, but you also put it into a good perspective there based off of that, James. So thank you.
Yeah. I just to keep coining those terms, because it's important for people to start adopting this language, because it's been my riff with fitness for at least a decade now, and it's important that we see the congruent lines on our language, right? Is that the intentions for movement should be because you can and because it's for you, period. And there's no other intentions outside of that are even worth the discussion. And that's where we're congruent. When you go after the period, if you put a comma there where it's like, oh, but for performance there's this, and then for rehab there's this, and it's like I don't even want to talk about it, because then that injects another different intention. Mm-hmm. So, but that's, do it because you can, and do it because it's for you. That's it. Not to big muscles, not to lose fat, not to, think you're going to be a better person, not because your friends are going to see you doing it and it becomes a virtue signal, right? None of those are good reasons to do it.
It seems like it's building into this new path for yourself, moving away from directly fitness and more into wellness and longevity, whether that be through Live a Larger Life, your podcast, or this idea of being a Vitality North Star. Can you discuss that a little bit, what you mean by that, and kind of what this new path means for you?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So with time and lots of time to sit and think, you start to review on the big picture of the intentions around movement. And then you look inside, from an outside perspective, looking inside, like, what are you actually doing? that promotes that, or that is a part of it. And so you say in different ways, oh, I'm a fitness coach, I'm part of the system, et cetera. And then you become a fitness educator. But then when you get outside of your education bubble or your practice bubble, you start seeing that, you just start seeing that the history of it for many years that I've been a part of, right? So I'll say 30 years now, there's a lot of repetitive instances that come up in multiple different systems that make you say, maybe, as a steelman argument against my strongest argument for vitality, I would say maybe, all the things that I really think are helpful for people is all just a big dependency model. So if you take that perspective, or as I will say, I have gotten to that point where, through my experience and being in the trenches, quote unquote, at multiple levels, right? And then having time to sit and think, you start looking back at the whole thing. You start looking at your own bubble. You start looking at society as a whole. And then you start recognizing that there's a very select few of individuals that are actually benefiting from any of your information. That's quote unquote collectively helpful. If you keep going down that road, then you will start coming up with these questions. What does it mean to exercise forever? And if you stretch that out into a book that's 400 pages long, you start recognizing there's these principles that arise from it. And one of the uglier, darker principles inside of it is that since the 70s, we have made the whole system of fitness and et cetera push into two camps of sport. It's really called one camp of sports medicine, but it's the performance paradigm or the rehab paradigm. And we've pushed all forms of education and knowledge around fitness into these two camps. And now there's a third arm coming up, a narcissistic version of it that's in the middle because of the new tech age and internet, et cetera, that makes all the intentions of fitness look really complex and super unachievable, and actually thwarts 80 to 90% of all movers out there from actually even taking the first steps of getting inside of it. So by asking those questions and contemplating on it, sitting on it for that period of time, you start recognizing, and this is just my view, okay? We're all a part of the game. We're a part of a big game that has ripped autonomy and the concept of free movement away from people to just make jobs for coaches, to make people just run around in boxes, and to actually make people, there's data to show it, more sick and less capable over time. Now you add the third arm social media to that, and you got yourself a really shitty storm. So what is vitality? Vitality is the concept that you want to be a mover every day for your whole life. And what's inside of that, right? Well, you're going to, other things will fall out of it. You're probably going to have to, and this is another, argumentative aspect of it, but the other two pillars of eating real food and reading books, right? Now, those two pieces of two statements are really, both of them can be opened up in larger levels, but those are just the highlighting moments of those two other things, where if you eat real food and you read books and you move every day, that's what we're calling our vitality model, which means that you're going to exercise every day. Why? Because you can, because it's for you, that you can do for your whole life. Not that gets you to a world championship. Not that gets you bigger muscles. Not that you can lift a heavier load. Not that, I go on and on with the examples of the other intentions outside of it. Not to fix your shitty lifestyle. Not to up against your shitty choices for your foods, right? No, if you actually put that together, that's what we call vitality. A person that doesn't need fitness, doesn't need a fitness coach. They just move every day for their whole life. And then now they have all this time to do, other big, really powerful, important things in their life, like build bridges. I just was in New York. I saw the Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Williamsburg bridges all back to back, thinking, what a worthy life that would have been to help build something like that. Anyways, sorry, take you off tangent of just bringing you back in time but you know what I mean? Anyways, that's a separate one, but that's vitality. I hope I've answered it. It's autonomous movers. It's there's no such thing as fitness anymore in that concept. Mm-hmm. Dependency on the whole system is stripped away.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to unpack there, and
yeah, well, it's a big question because
it is.
The vitality concept needs to be opened up for larger discussion. So I appreciate the question.
Absolutely. Well, there's one part of it that I'd like to get a little bit more in depth on. It's the third pillar. You didn't mention too much about reading. Is this actually reading a physical book? Is that kind of what you're like? Not an audiobook, not is it reading a physical book and being engrossed in the moment of actually physically doing that? Or is it the educational component of learning something new or diving more deeply into a topic that is interesting to you? What about that pillar completes the circle of vitality?
Yeah, so I'll repeat that the reading of books is an example of learning every day.
Okay.
That would entail growing your mind, and that would entail heterodox opinions. So that would entail, reading, McCullough's 800. I'm just looking down at, which I can't even believe I'm going to get to, but an 895-page book on Christianity for an atheist. And then right next to it is Christopher Hitchens' God Is Not Great, and religion poisons everything. So my whole point on that is that you can't get to an idea on an opinion of a specific area without reading, not just those two. You go back and forth, right? You read Chesterton's Orthodoxy, right? And then you go back to Sam Harris and The End of Faith. And then you read Zachariah's, End of Reason. And then you go back and forth. But you see, my point is that all inside of that, whether it's a book, I mean, I love the concept of books itself, and I just want to take a second because I wrote down, or I create these coach tips all the time. Why books? ? It requires a degree of isolation and therefore silent dialogue of thought that comes with a bonus retreat from the harsh public. So why books? That's fucking why books. Because there's no other way you can get your own silent time for critical thinking that you can come up with yourself. So if you want to color it a different way, sure, audiobooks, yes, whatever, but you got to learn. You got to learn every day, right? And my point would be on it, to keep on it, is that I think you're gonna have a really hard time finding people with really shitty, harsh decision making skills who have not read a whole bunch of books on a specific topic back and forth. So that's what I mean by it. And if you're like, well, I don't like books, okay, well, you got to read some things, yeah. So it's just the concept of learning every day. Grow your mind. And yeah, but there's other things inside of it too. Like if you've ever read books, it's like you can't just flip through books, right? No, you need dedicated hours of time. But the kind of stuff that you learn inside of it, and you can see, obviously, I'm excited about it. It's not a green screen. I'm a voracious reader. I enjoy reading it, but it's just and I want to be careful on my biases. Not everyone is interested in that, but I really think there's something to it, right? It can like what you guys probably experienced at Power Monkey. It's an individual camp for people, right? It's a couple of hours every day of like, no, this is my time to actually learn something that like sticks, right? That sticks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, and we've gotten to a fraction of the questions that we had on our list here, and I just appreciate the depth that we can go into with you on how your mind works around these things and where you envision the next phase of wellness and longevity kind of going. And those three pillars are pretty powerful, and this idea of learning every day, I think, is such a critical component to it. So I appreciate you giving a little more insight into it.
Yeah, no, it also helps me redefine my language of it if I'm going to speak about it for the next number of years. I need to get really good at the list of things that people can partake in.
One thing for me, James, that was helpful is, I think everything that you were saying had a very firm voice to it, but also had a lot of space. Like for me, a lot of what you were saying, whether it was the three pillars, when you threw in like heterodoxy, that was helpful, because then I start thinking, that there's always a spectrum of thought and perspective and experience to learn from. So, your examples of books, to see two sides of the equation. But then within those two sides, there's a giant space to travel through. And I think within, our life and a life that is, I would say all of us, our goal is to not be sedentary. We want to move, and not just to move, but because we can. There's a lot to explore. So I think somebody could hear, of course, and Dave and I are, passionate about where we are right now in the field of fitness. So it could be very easy to take that almost sensitive and say like, you won't need fitness, because you'll be moving essentially, or you'll be active to the point where you're active because you can, you're doing things you want to because you're overly functional. At the same time, maybe you get to that place because of being in the right fitness community that empowers you to then take the step to that level, or maybe that level is intimidating for you and then you take a step back, but you have a place to come back to. So I know I'm rambling a little bit now, but I'm just thinking of more or less everybody.
You're sneaking in one of the list of 15 things that people get indirectly scared about when we talk about fitness deconstruction.
No, and I like that term too. And mine more is a place of deconstructing anything. I wouldn't say it scares me. I'm happy to see that there can be space for it. So if there's a space to do these things, have these conversations, and eventually evolve and move into a better self, because a better self can be a better collective. Like if we're all sitting, in our own garbage all the time.
The argument against that is that there's no critiques of the system inside fitness besides myself.
That's and I would say that's
I'm
probably
one. So there's 15,000
on
the other side. So there's no bouncing back and forth, right? Which is why I'm also realistic when I make those statements. None of my ideas are going to come to fruition. Pause, right? But really think about it. I mean, it's just reality. It doesn't take away that I still can't have those opinions. I'm allowed to have those opinions, right? But what's the chance of that happening? Man, the machine is so big and dependent right now, it's not going to be taken away. So although you can have an argument for it, which is not your point that I'm glad you clarified you were making, but, people can get there through community. No, that's only because it's been an option. But if you actually play out the whole idea of the concept of vitality, when kids at a young age recognize, not because their parents are role modeling some stupid lifestyle prescription, but they recognize that, oh, wow, it's just a normal thing to eat real food and to move every day. There's no such thing as fitness when they become an adult. You see that? So you got to keep working it through to make everyone recognize, just because what we have going on today, that's not good reason that the other option can't be there. All the while also saying, listen, I know I'm batshit crazy when I say it, but I can't. But once I think about it, I can't unthink it, if that makes sense. Like, because I know it's simple. I know the answers are simple, right? So then you got to say, well, why isn't everyone doing it?
Well, the answers are simple, but in action is not so simple. And
Exactly.
uh,
Exactly.
and I have one more question off of that, and I don't think it's a simple answer, so feel free to just say it's for another time.
Oh,
But
you
is
teed me up with the vitality one, so
yeah.
um my brain is working now, working well.
But I'm curious about whether or not competitiveness has a place within that. If fitness is not necessary and just living a life of movement is kind of what we're working towards, is does being
Not
competitive.
anymore. Not anymore. I would say in 1970s, in a school setting, the concept of like younger kids being slightly competitive, and then meritocracy still being in place for someone being rewarded for the higher echelons of capability of physical expression. I think that was at a time in our culture where it was possible. But after 20 years now of the incessant onslaught of people perceiving that how others see them on digital media, and the concept that was entrenched by CrossFit saying that we got to get people moving. How do we do it? We make workouts, games, and competitions, right? And all the shit and the bad behaviors and the firestorms that came from that you guys may not see day to day, but I've dealt with for 20 years. Fuck that. No, there's no place for competition inside a movement anymore. And it would be one of the, in my opinion, one of the worst things that we should reintroduce, even at a purist, like a purist 1970s concept level. The worst things you can introduce on a base support of the digital world. Worst things.
That's very interesting, and I do think that that's a question that has its own time to really dive a little deeper into. Just one last question on that. I, I think you're speaking very much on the negatives that have come along with what you've seen, the people you work with from the competitive side. Is there anything positive that has come out of competitiveness or striving
Yeah,
to
maybe this conversation, maybe these thoughts.
Okay.
You
Okay.
know,
I
no,
think
In terms of achievement of,
yeah, I want to be
you know,
careful not to, just to be a, yeah, because I mean, sure, there's, it gets to this point where we realize these things, but I keep going back to like, a parallel story is, concussions in the NFL is apropos, past couple of weeks, the conversation again.
mhm,
That this conversation is going to go on for 30 more years. Do you see what I'm saying? So, you know,
mhm,
Bob Costas a couple of years ago, oh, gee, I wouldn't put my 13-year-old boy, and nothing changes.
mhm,
Do you see what I'm saying? Like nothing changes,
mhm.
but it's still physical sacrifice, right? Of humans, right? So what does competition do? Sure, it may gets everyone, some person like myself or us, for every 10 years to just play it out in conversation, right? Oh, that was good. Yeah, I learned a lot from that. But
Interesting. That's
yeah,
definitely a further
I think
or
conversation.
it will sour on it
It,
for
well,
no,
it's
I
I
interesting
think
thought.
I
from
have,
someone who was ultra competitive,
yeah.
15 years ago.
Yeah, so there's the answer.
Yeah.
You got to be in the fire and in the abyss to kind of come on the outside and be like, fuck no, do I want anyone else participating in that?
Hmm.
No bueno. That's not vitality. No, that's physical sacrifice, right? That's not longevity.
Mhm.
That's the farthest from longevity.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
And I
Mike,
was
you want
just,
to add anything to that?
yeah, I always like to be a voice of positivity. I think we all are in our own way. No, I was just that like
We've done positivity too long in fitness, so it's
yeah, and I always have to think of a
nothing has happened.
different term to use for it, but I would say cautious optimism then. So like, I mean, everything is progressing and evolving and growing and expanding to something. So like the conversation that we're all having, we're all going to have probably different impulses and views and thoughts on it. But at the same time, yeah, we can make a lot of lists and goals that look relatively simple. The process to get to them is not simple, but again, neither has evolution been. So maybe 30 years, it doesn't look any different. Maybe 300 years from now, it's something much closer to what you're saying. And then, as with all visionaries, people will look back to your shaking head and say, James knew what he was talking about, and we should have listened to him. And maybe not.
But I'm dead then, so it doesn't.
And then
so
then you're a part of something that's grown from that. So I'm curious to see where it all evolves, even when I'm no longer here and just floating around in the particles.
Well,
yeah, you could just look at some stats of the waistlines of America, and you could look at education of young kids in America, and you could look at economy in America, and just take even like an uneducated view on the outside looking at those three things. You're not going to be too positive, because it's not like over a couple of years things have changed, right? And what, with Zoom and COVID, man, that added fuel to that fire. That didn't like fix things, so you can see where my challenges with the progressive idea inside of fitness, right? There's lots of ideas, but nothing changes, right? But what does change is some people that are in front of you. Oh, that's great. I'm not, there's lots of positive things in that. That's fantastic. But the question that everyone inside of fitness has to think about over time is, what's the definition of collective impact and collective contribution? I think we have to, I shouldn't say we, because it's imperative as to what everyone else should do, but I think we should start asking those questions, right? And maybe I'm just, not to use your words, maybe I'm just older, right? So maybe, and I've been in it longer, where I've seen multiple revolutions of the same stuff, to be like, no, 5 times and it gets monotonous. And then you strip it all away and you're like, oh, wow, it's a really dependent system, and it only helps a few. That's the reality.
James, I think we got to have a part 2 with you, if that's okay.
I've got like part
I have
2
more
and
time.
part 3.
Unless you guys don't, or your listeners won't have more. But
well, we like to keep it at about an hour. So
okay.
If it's good with you, I am very, very grateful for the time with you today. And
likewise, thanks for your questions.
Of course. Before we get you out of here, we have some quick ones that we always like to ask guests. Okay. I'm curious of your responses on these.
Okay.
First one is, what sport or discipline you prefer? Me, Chad, Vaughn, who's one of my other co-hosts here, and Mike always has a running tally here. But what sport or discipline do you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics, between the two?
Gymnastics in my later career.
Thank you very much. I'll take that as an important check in my box. Question number 2. Are there any guests that you think would be great for us to interview on the podcast? Somebody that you've look up to or come across recently, somebody that would be a good interview for us?
Man, I wish I could give you someone that no, I don't have anyone. There's so many people that I wish were so many people with great ideas and really make you think really hard, that are really tough topics, but that has nothing to do with fitness. So it's like, why recommend why recommend that conversation?
We might just because of this conversation with you, James, we might have to do like a parallel Power Monkey podcast. It's like Power Monkey, not the fitness, since just to get us some side conversations going on.
Yeah. Call it something like what would be anyways, I got other ideas on that, but you can't call it Power Monkey. If it's over there now.
Well, yeah, I know that question is
a high threshold monkey, basically. It's like what humans, Homo sapiens, are just high threshold monkeys.
Jordan, write that down.
Got that for rebranding purposes.
And I don't need to ask this one because just in terms of books, you've already given us a bunch that you're reading right now. So we'll move on from something you might
Yeah,
be.
well, that wasn't right now. Right now though, I do actually want to promote this one.
Go for it.
I picked it up in a bookstore by Columbia from a referral of a friend. It's called Happiness in Action by Adam Sandell. And over the past number of years, I've been learning from numerous philosophers, read a tremendous amount on philosophy, and now have partnered up with a colleague who is steeped in philosophy. We do our own podcast called Fitness and Philosophy. Anyways, this book brings philosophy and fitness together. So it's worth taking a stab at.
Excellent. Thank you for the recommendation. We'll definitely take a look. Well, before we get you out of here, do you have anything else you have going on? Where can people find you, or more information on OPEX? Where would you recommend our listeners going to?
Yeah, go to opexfit.com. We have everything here.
Excellent. Well, James, thank you again. Really appreciate the time. It was enlightening for me, to say the least. I really hope that our paths cross in person sometime soon. And if not, hopefully we can get you back on the podcast to kind of go through part 2. It'd be great to chat a little bit more.
Yeah, whenever you guys wish, I'm open.
Thank you very much.
Amazing.
Well,
Thank you so much, James.
Okay.
For the listeners out there, please be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com for services and upcoming events. Check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Mike Service, and at Dave Durante. And on behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your hosts. I'm Dave Durante with my co-host Mike Service. And until next time, thank you all for listening.